Teachers, what's the darkest thing you've seen from a student? Had a student in my class as a sophomore. Every morning her junior year she would come in and chat in the morning. One day out of the blue it stopped. In fact, she wasn't at school at all anymore. Fast forward 3 months, she shows up and looks broken. I ask her what's going on. After quite a bit of hesitation, she tells me that she went to a party and was DD. No alcohol in her system, however. She woke up the next morning and couldn't remember a thing about the previous night. A couple weeks later, she finds out she is pregnant. She was a virgin before that night, roofied and raped. She had only told her counselor and now me. I haven't had a chance to talk to her due to COVID. Her outlook and demeanor was night and day before and after that party. My mom was a school nurse and always came home with some crazy stories. One of the most blood-curdling things she has was a girl that was really into gutting to the point where she had a scar that covered the majority of the outside of her bicep. The girl one day decided that she hated her scar and wanted to get rid of it. At home, by herself, she decided she was going to get rid of them. In her bathroom, she took a knife to her arm, cutting a 4 inches by 6 inches piece of scar tissue that was just under an inch thick out of her arm. She then proceeded to stitch it up using a needle and thread and bandage it with gauze all by herself. She then woke up and went to school the next day so she could go to my mom's office and ask if it looked infected. It was. I am an English teacher and I am the sponsor of the school's comic book and anime club. This year, I managed to take my club to a convention, and many of them had several firsts, such as meeting celebrities, LARPing, participating in panels, speaking to professional artists, and just being with a larger fandom community. Upon our return, one of my members, a 16-year-old girl, asked to speak to me privately. She proceeded to tell me that she had been molested by her father and uncle ever since she was 12. On her 16th birthday, she finally had enough of the abuse and she contacted the police and told them everything. Before the investigation could begin, her uncle committed suicide out of shame. Her father was about to do the same, but she was able to convince him not to do it. He is now facing trial for his crimes. She then thanked me and said that the 2 days we spent at the convention were the happiest days of her life, and it allowed her to feel like a child for the first time in 4 years. It was the proudest moment of my career. In elementary school we had a kid with a severe peanut allergy and a teacher caught some kids rubbing peanut butter on the opening of his water bottle. We also had a kid who could describe in detail about how to prepare heroin. I substituted at a school for kids with intellectual disabilities and emotional disorders for a while. Majority of the kids had autism to varying degrees. The darkest stuff didn't come from the students so much as faculty gossiping about what the students' home lives were like, but from the kids themselves. In one class with more verbal and well-behaved students, occasionally one would, for instance, get frustrated with a problem, start yelling, "None of this shit matters," followed by what I would call quasi-suicidal existential ideation. It would kind of set off a chain reaction in the class where other students would sort of rally along in agreement. I was a substitute for a while several years ago. I did a special education classes mostly. Everything from kids who simply had a learning disability to students with severe disabilities such as ASD and behavioral issues. One kid had a very low IQ and suffered from ADHD. He would come in every day an absolute mess. He was beyond violent and had zero control over his emotions. It's common to see those sorts of issues in some of these kiddos, but we didn't understand why it was this bad. He had medication prescribed and on file to help with some of his issues. Well, come to find out, Mom had been keeping his medication to do only God knows what with. He wasn't getting anything to help with these very real problems. Eventually this kid lost his shit on the teacher's aide in the class and the school had to expel him. One class I was in a lot had mostly kids with ADHD, dyslexia, mild behavioral issues, and I really connected with them. It was a challenge, but I loved them. There was a boy, maybe 10 years old, who would talk to me quite a bit about his father who was in a local rehab program for meth abuse. It was a religious thing that kept people on a campus and had them do church stuff, labor, and volunteer work. Anyway, he would give me updates every few weeks. At the end of the year he comes up and says, "Guess what, Ems? Phoenix 0113, I think my dad is gonna come home. He says he's not gonna do drugs anymore and he's done at rehab." I can't wait for him to come home." He went on about how they were gonna do father-son type things. It was heartbreaking to watch a child deal with a parent in rehab for meth. He was so hopeful and there was a deep love there. I hope sincerely, every time I think of that sweet kid, his dad is healthy and present for his son. I taught welding and metal sculpture at the high school level for a year. One morning, one of my students, a quiet, awkward, but really nice young man, came into class and asked me for a band-aid. I asked him what for and he replied that it was for a burn. Class hadn't started yet for the day. He showed me and it was a fresh second-degree burn that was already blistering. It was in the shape of an A. Some kids, if I'm going to be honest, they were bottom performers and troublemakers, from a different class of mine had swiped a small metal letter A from one of my supply bins, heated it with a lighter, and then branded this kid on the morning school bus. He had let the kids do it because he really wanted to fit in. He didn't have many friends and these kids had seemed cool because they were always acting out. As a mandatory reporter, I reported it. The police got involved. Other than that, I have no idea what else happened. Not my student. He's from the class next door when I was student teaching. This child had a confusing home life. Apparently he was adopted by a family member, but it's unclear what happened to his biological parents. Anyway, he goes through these intense mood swings. Multiple times throughout the year he would pull the fire alarm and made a break for the school's parking lot at one moment, and then deeply apologetic another moment, as if he wasn't in control of himself just an hour ago. During his outbursts he would occasionally attempt to enter a room, and when he found that he couldn't, he would bang the door and scream at the top of his lungs as if it's a zombie movie. And yes, this is all while instruction is happening. He would literally escape the classroom in the middle of a lesson. He has caused lockdowns. As it turns out, this child is suicidal, and his actions might or might not be self-harming in a sense, since he knows these behaviors would earn him a punishment. Apparently, at home, he's been reported to jump out of a moving car. Later in the year he also told his teacher and para that he wants to die. His class was awesome though. His teacher had the whole class write a note to the kid, and they all wrote such sweet encouraging notes. The teacher then made a collage and gave it to him as a gift. After his outburst episodes when he comes back apologizing, the whole class would give him a group hug. At one point all his teachers talked to him after one of his episodes, basically saying how they have such high expectations for him, how far he has come and how much further he will go. My mentor teacher attended this talk. She cried after. I imagine I would too. Sometimes there is a comical side to this situation, though. One day as I was teaching science, I saw the principal chasing this kid down the road through the window, somehow wielding a long stick as if he's about to shepherd him back to his pen, and I had to just keep teaching and act like I didn't see anything. It was a rough student teaching year. I had stories in my room too, but damn did I learn a lot. I'm not a teacher, but I had an off hour in high school and I usually would use it for going home or just hanging out. I was asked by my film photography teacher if I could help with teaching by showing some of my examples and helping mostly 9th graders. I was in 11th grade at the time. I noticed one kid was really quiet and socially awkward, but he had really good prints. And after a couple days I noticed a lot of film was missing, and so I asked my teacher. He said that the quiet kid paid for some extra film to take home and use. I brushed it off for a while until it came to show some of the prints to the class. The quiet kid was third up and I was over near his desk and I noticed some of the pictures he printed. It was two people who turned out to be his mother and father on the floor with what I can assume a large quantity of drugs and alcohol. Most of the photos were of his living situation. It was one of the saddest things I've seen. He was a bright and happy person. I got in contact with him a couple months ago and he's living with his grandparents after his mom and dad got into a fight of money. He now shoots a lot of nature photography. I had a kid who really wanted his parents to come to his graduation ceremony, but they were both sex offenders and couldn't be on campus. He just wanted someone there to support him. Not to defend sex offenders, but sometimes the law is written in such a way that not all sex offenders are actual creeps. My case, when we were 22, a good friend of mine ended up becoming a sex offender. His crime, getting drunk at a beach bar in Panama City Beach, FL, stumbling out to the surf at 2 a.m., and taking a whiz in the ocean. His genitalia was exposed in public and an overzealous judge dropped the hammer on him. Worst part is that he truly is a decent dude and now that's going to follow him for quite some time. A former student of mine was always the quiet one in class, taught them for 4 years, and I spent a large amount of time trying to get them to open up and contribute to class as their written work was exceptional. 7 years after graduation, they emailed to apologize for being quiet and that they didn't want me to think they were stuck up. They were being frequently raped by a family member the whole time and were too afraid to speak out. Absolutely broke me.